what led you to this role, and how has your background shaped your approach?
Sure. Yeah, so when I first started in the international development field, it was in the monitoring and evaluation industry, and that's all about creating data so that we can track the progress, the efficiency, the effectiveness of where our money goes. That's when I lived in England, and I moved back to the United States, and when I did that, I started to become much more invested in the domestic policy and how we use our funds here. And I, like most people in this town, got a consulting job, and I started realizing the quality of the data and the fact that what I was doing in countries in Africa, I could not do in the United States. I could not track over time where money was being spent. I couldn't track, let alone outcomes. I couldn't even track activities. And so that, after being a consultant for various years, led me to apply for a job at FEMA. And I worked in the field for a while at FEMA, doing analytics and situational awareness reporting and monitoring there. And then the Evidence Act occurred in 2018, and that's when government agencies started to really get serious, at least in my opinion, about a chief data officer, and really starting to fund a lot of these initiatives that require you to think about the data from an enterprise perspective. And so a job opened up at FEMA about data enablement, data literacy under the chief data officer, and I've been doing that now for about 3.5 years. So that's kind of the journey as an end user of data, and as a collector and a creator of data, kind of making my way into more of the data governance, the data quality, and the data literacy aspect from an enterprise perspective.
Thank you. It's always interesting to see just what an open job posting can lead to, right? Look at you now, 6 years later, right? Can you briefly just, talk about how data literacy in general fits into the agency's mission and what they're trying to do, as an agency?
Sure, yeah. So FEMA, our mission statement is helping people before, during, and after disasters. And we take that mission very seriously. To be able to prepare, to be ready for our mission, to help with mitigation before even a disaster happens, we need information, and we need good information to make those decisions in real time. You need really good information when the ops tempo is quite fast in a disaster situation. You're sometimes making decisions on data that you get on a piece of paper. And that just isn't going to fly when people's lives are at stake. So data literacy is very important to our mission. And I think it becomes more obvious when the ops tempo becomes faster. Also, COVID, I think, was a rude awakening for our agency, because what happened is we exacerbated our information management. So we went from having to deal with sometimes, data on one state for one disaster to having to deal with data for 50 states, all tribes, all territories. And so what you could do ad hoc, manually, to manage your data, to get up the quality of the information and to analyze for maybe a small amount of information for one state, you really can't do for all 50 states. And so that need to become more literate on all the different levels of our agency, I think, became even more clear.
So where exactly, I think knowing the importance of what type of data FEMA is working with, how did you decide on the best approach to even first decide what data literacy meant for the organization, and then how do you raise that for employees?
Yeah, so I think my experience was based a lot on what happened in COVID because as someone that was in the field doing analysis, I was really dependent on the operations folks downrange who definitely do not consider themselves data people, but they're collecting the data. They're literally speaking to the people and getting firsthand accounts of the information. And then, from there it would go to folks in planning, or it would go to some program manager, and then it would kind of make its way to me. And I realized the data life cycle is so dependent on people who do not consider themselves data people. So when we started thinking about literacy and how do we build a literacy program, we knew from the beginning that we wanted every single person at FEMA to understand that it was their responsibility, part of their job, to have some foundational knowledge about data. They are not meeting the mission if they do not understand what the median is. We really went in and said, we want you to understand data like you write in a Word document, and we want you to understand the basics, not every day. So we came up with the term data citizen. A lot of other federal agencies I know have started to use this terminology, but we created a data citizen concept, which we define as you're a citizen to FEMA's data. You have responsibility to maintain the integrity of the data, and then the data will provide back to you, and we'll give you the insights that help you make the decisions. It's a two-way partnership, just like you're a citizen of the United States, you're a citizen of the data. And so we created, this concept of data citizen, and have really put that concept in our policy documents, in all of our data standards, and we even created in our data management directive, which is a policy that codifies everyone's responsibility. We even use the word everyone at FEMA as a data citizen, and so everyone has this bare minimum responsibility to maintain literacy and some other things that relate to their day-to-day job. So that's kind of how we started. And then, of course, with literacy, we don't expect we expect everyone to be foundationally literate, but we don't expect everyone to be power users of, a data visualization software. We don't expect everyone to understand geospatial analysis, and we don't expect everyone to be able to build generative AI models or things like that. So then we built on top of that. This is the foundational level we want everyone to get to, and then here's some more advanced skills and tracks that we want people to be able to take. And so that's really the strategy behind our literacy program.
So, and I think, and that's a very robust strategy that you all put into place, but I think a lot of people in this room know that sometimes you can have the perfect strategy, but then it really comes down to what buy-in you can get from other stakeholders. Can you tell me a little bit about how you went about doing that at FEMA?
Yeah, we picked real life examples. So we went to our executive leadership and we picked real life examples of when they were not able to get the information they needed to make the decision in enough time. I'll give you an example. We sometimes we share data with our state, our local, our tribal government partners. And so there are real-time decision-making that needs to happen with temporary housing during a disaster, shelter, food, and water. And we were able to point to very specific examples where they couldn't, they did not get the data they needed in time, and so they had to make a decision without the information. And we were then able to relate that to specific policies or specific processes, so government. So we have a lot of processes in place to share data, to access data, and to have people understand what their responsibilities are. So we were able to relate it back to people, processes, and then in some cases technology, but that's kind of on the side. But the people and the processes we were able to relate it to. We showed that if we have a higher, much more literate workforce, the processes could change. We would be able to continuously improve on those processes and those policies that are in place. So that was a few examples. And then one other thing we did was we have some executive leadership training. So we actually identified our executive leaders as a priority group to go through data training. And if our executive leaders have the training, they are much more likely then to understand the value of just holistic data literacy.
So you think that top-down approach was part of the keys to your success?
Yeah, and it took time. It was I think a whole year and a half communications campaign of why we need data literacy and why we want to change the culture at FEMA. But eventually, yeah, I think, and they kind of got excited about it in the end, and we did get some support and leadership support.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. And to your point earlier, you have a lot of people in the city that don't think of themselves as technology folks, right? But when you show them examples of this was a decision based off of data, then they can start to maybe think in our world and in the data and analytics space. So I really love that approach. Would you be able to tell us about just exactly how you started rolling this out to the users, particularly with the Data Citizen track?
Yeah, so we have over 20,000 people at FEMA that we rolled out our Data Citizen literacy program to. We took a comms-heavy approach, and we blog posts, and we got people excited. We made some mascots, and we tried to get people to find it less intimidating and just fun, right? And I know DataCamp also gamifies it a little bit. So we started off with just ramping up the excitement. We had a data summit to talk to people and hear from them and their data quality issues and what type of data skills they were looking for. And then we rolled it out in a phased approach. So we had an early adopter program who kind of gave us some early feedback. We rolled it out for them for a month or two, and that was a few hundred people. And we would get their feedback, and we would talk to them. And then we started to roll it out to just our data analysts, because we knew they would champion this. They already are interested in data, and so let's get them the accounts first. So we rolled it out to data analysts and sort of chunks of 2,000, 3,000 people, data analysts at a time. And then we started rolling it out by office. And we would do Q&A sessions for people, really, why is this a thing? Why is this available to me? These sort of simple questions. We would show them the value of it by talking about people who had used the program and gained the skill. So we wrote this large article, and we sent it through the FEMA newsletter that comes out weekly that talks about just all the happenings at FEMA. Well, we had one that talked about how data citizens used the skills they learned to do a new project or to help them in their day-to-day. And we had their picture attached and things like that. So it took about a year to roll out to every single person at FEMA. And we also rolled it out to our reservists. And so we have core, we have FEMA Corps, which are sort of, they're like Peace Corps, but for FEMA. And we rolled it out to them, and we also rolled it out to our reservists, who are part-time employees, but they are called up to duty when a disaster happens. And we identified them as a big need group too. So that's how we rolled it out, and we're now maintaining it. And so we have to regularly, of course, there's account management, which is the boring part, but there's also getting to talk to people and seeing what they like about it, what they don't like. There's also just-in-time training that we do in the field, and we're making data citizen onboarding a part of that. We're also, in our management of our program, customizing some material for FEMA-specific policies so that they can see themselves in the policy and understand, like, what is the data management directive? What is the data sharing directive? We have these bigger policies, and making sure that they're aware that they exist and that they have responsibilities outlined in there. And so that's kind of our this year plan, is to maintain and to customize a little bit and to get that feedback and then loop back around.
I love that you've incorporated the data citizen as part of a new employee's onboarding. Where do you see the data citizen curriculum, which is data literacy focused, something that would apply to all employees? Where do you see that evolving, and what directions do you think that might take?
Yeah, so I mean, the previous conversation talked about AI. I think that we move into the AI space a little bit. They are going to be interacting with these models. They are already interacting with these models. So understanding just fundamentals of AI, I can see in the future being incorporated into that. It's interesting because when you talk to people about AI, they get that data quality is an important thing. They'll say garbage in, garbage out. Like, they get it, but they don't quite get, well, then how do I ensure the quality? How do I ensure that it's not garbage? And what is my role to ensuring that it's not garbage? Because I'm not a database engineer, right? And so kind of helping them understand the connection between their day-to-day work and the data integrity, and how do I report data quality issues, all those sorts of things, I think is where we see the data citizen track moving in the future. But right now we're trying to just understand basic data concepts.
I heard a quote from one of your FEMA administrators of DataCamp earlier today, and they were telling other FEMA users that the reason we want you to take this is so that you can speak the same language as your technical teams. Could you speak to that a little bit more, and maybe like examples of success you've seen there?
Yeah, I think many times there's a lack of understanding of all that it takes to get information to a spot that it's digestible, and that you can make those real, like, decision making. You can have decision making on the data in real time. I think a lot of times leaders in particular will ask for something, and they're like, well, we have the data. And it's like, the data is not in a place to get you to that decision. And understanding what the data can tell you with confidence and what the data cannot tell you, I think is really important. And a lot of times we see a disconnect between the folks that manage our databases and then the people making the decisions. And the analysts tend to be that liaison role. They tend to take on so many different hats, data stewards, data liaison, and things like that. And so we really want people to, we really want to take responsibilities away from data analysts. And that's something that we hear time and time again. Like, I'll go into our regions, or I'll go into the field, and the data analysts are just swamped. And all they want to do, and I personally felt this as one of them, you just want to analyze. You want to do the fun stuff. You want to create the models. You want to look at the trends. But you spend so much time cleaning data, or you spend so much time translating what you can and can't do to the decision makers. So we're looking to have a more informed enterprise so that the analysts can do more sophisticated, advanced analytics. So I think that's like part of that, why we want people to understand a little bit more of the technicality of it.
So they can come with a starting place and then make the analyst jobs a lot easier in the future so that they can get back to analyzing things.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What, there's a lot of other, organizations here tonight that I'm sure, just would love to hear some advice about rolling out a data enablement program at scale. And I think you've given, a lot of great information about, how this initiative came about. But just love to, your key takeaways and advice if they had to leave with anything.
Yeah, I think the most important factor is connecting the data operations, the quality of the data, the management of the data, data literacy to values that the leaders care about. And so at FEMA, that is mission readiness, that is being prepared, that is resiliency in the face of natural disasters. So we didn't start that way, but when we started to connect to those value statements, those big, meaningful value statements, we started to have people nodding in the room. They may not have understood everything that we were saying, but they started to understand that our objectives were the same. And if they wanted to meet their mission and look good for their bosses, that we were partners in that journey. So I think that's the first thing, is really getting to that relationship between the value and the mission. The second is the champions. We found the most amazing people who were just so excited to work with us. They saw the value in it. They were struggling with the lack of data skills around them. This was especially true when we'd go to smaller teams where there's like one they call the smart person, and they just do it all. They're like stewarding data, they're analyzing, they're managing the database, like they're doing it all. And we could really tell how tired they were. And another way we could tell is the retention rates of our data. Our technical people were just really low, I think, in the agency. And so finding champions in the data community, we have a few data communities, analytics community, brown bag, we meet at lunch and we discuss analytics things. We have data stewardship community of practice. We have some communities, and so we were able to find our champions in those communities, and that was really helpful too, because they were willing to spread the word, talk about data camp. When they started taking the training, they spread the word about all the other data policies that we were putting in place, and that really made a huge difference. So I would say between those two things, and then not giving up.